Man, I'd wish I earned money while I'm sleeping. Or if you're interested in any other freebies while you're sleeping, well, then this video is for you. Based on the release timing of this video, some of you might consider including the key message of my video in your New Year's resolution. However, you can start any day of the year to make a very simple tweak in your life with huge gains in your health and well-being. And just before you think this is just another fitness this or that video, I got very comforting news for you. My health advice requires much less effort than you think, though its benefits might rival those of hitting the gym regularly. Curious? Well, then stick around. If you are new to this channel, here at HealthWealth, my goal is not only to make you a better investor. I know that in order to have a fulfilled life, you need more than just a fat portfolio. Just like improving your financial situation requires deliberate effort, so does taking care of your health. But the latter does not necessarily have to be difficult. In fact, quite the opposite is true, in line with my philosophy, work smarter, not harder. Increasing a financial or any other benefit without having to actively do much is a dream of many people. No pun intended. How many times have you heard, to get healthy, you need to work out and get to the gym regularly? In order to make lots of money, you have to work really hard and long hours. The latter is true if you work for money, and the key to becoming a good investor is to have money work for you. So, what if I told you that the concept of seemingly getting a benefit without having to put in any real effort applies also outside of the investment world? In this video, we're diving into the research and scientifically proven health benefits of sleep. In the video, you'll be seeing extracts from an excellent talk of the world-renowned expert on sleep, Professor Matthew Walker. I'll leave the link to this excellent talk he gave at Google in the description below. Since many of you may not have the time to watch the full hour talk he gave at Google, I'm going to discuss what I believe are the key takeaway messages and how they apply to our daily lives and as an active investor. After all, my goal here at HealthWealth is to maximize your financials as well as your health. So let's dive in.
There are other things, though, too. What happens to you cognitively? What happens to your capability to make decisions, to learn, to do all the stuff we have to do in a working environment?
So if you're not sleeping, one of the first things that you become deficient in is your capacity to learn. So we've done studies where we will, again, deprive people of sleep or give them a full night, and then we'll try and have them learn a whole list of new facts. So essentially, is pulling the all-nighter a good idea? And the answer seems to be no, because the brain is about 40% deficient in its ability to lay down new memory traces when it is underslept. And 40% is non-trivial. I mean, that's the difference between acing an exam and failing it miserably. And I think that's particularly concerning for sleep in our education populations right now. We also know that you need sleep after learning, however, not just before learning, to essentially hit the save button on those new memories so that you don't forget.
So, if you want to learn anything new and retain that information for future use, then you're doing this best when you have slept enough.
One of the other things that starts to go awry is your emotional stability. What we found is that there's a deep structure in the brain called the amygdala, and it's the centerpiece region for the sort of generation of strong emotional reactions, impulsive reactions. The reason that you typically are not impulsive and you're emotionally rational is because another part of your brain called the prefrontal cortex, which sits above your eyes, that's like the CEO of the brain. It's very good at making high-level, top-down kind of controlling decisions. And it keeps our emotional brain in check. But when you're sleep deprived, the first part of the brain to take a nosedive like a dart into the ground is your prefrontal cortex, which unleashes your emotional brain. And so we see that the amygdala is about 60% more reactive under conditions of sleep deprivation. And what's interesting is that it's pendulum-like, that you are not only sort of more negative in terms of your responses, you're also much more likely to be more reward-seeking and more sensation-seeking. So the emotional distance within which you travel when you're sleep deprived is vastly larger. So you become more emotionally irrational as well upstairs in the brain.
As an investor, you need to make rational decisions. Therefore, you need your prefrontal cortex to be fully in charge. But when sleep deprived, your amygdala, the part of your brain controlling your emotions, is the sole entity in charge. Therefore, a sleep-deprived investor is likely going to make emotional investment decisions rather than rational ones. You might be more inclined to make rash decisions about buying or selling securities at the wrong time. The market is going down. What? The world must be coming to an end. Let's sell everything. This is what your emotions will tell you. In contrast, a fully rested investor remembers his or her game plan and follows through with buying at a discount and cost averaging on well-researched investment opportunities, and overall will enjoy much better returns, literally while sleeping. Sounds too good to be true? But it isn't. Now, if enough sleep was not already for free, I'd say immediately, where do I sign up? The good news is that enough sleep is in fact for free, and you are not only going to be a better investor, you are also going to be happier and more fulfilled in your life, feeling more active because you are not in a constant state of drowsy mind, only temporarily improved through caffeine-induced self-medication.
The other thing I would note, by the way, that's increasingly now interesting within the brain is not an acute effect, but a chronic effect. That chronic effect concerns Alzheimer's disease. And we now know that insufficient sleep is probably one of the most significant lifestyle factors determining whether you will develop Alzheimer's. Why is that? The reason is because at night there is a cleansing system that kicks into high gear within your brain. So in your body you have a cleaning system called the lymphatic system. Well, in your brain, we recently discovered that you have something called the glymphatic system.
Therefore, sleep is absolutely essential because during the night, the metabolic byproducts of all of the activities that have been happening in the brain are washed away. And this is only happening while you sleep.
What we know is that men who sleep 5 hours a night have significantly smaller testicles than those who sleep 7 hours or more. In addition, men who...
That's relevant because...
Well... struggling to come up with an answer to that one, but...
Is it to do with fertility, or...?
Well, what's also interesting is that if you look at the sex hormones, men who are sleeping 4 to 5 hours a night will have a level of testosterone which is that of someone 10 years their senior.
Wow.
Well, no, if anything else was not a motivation to sleep more and sleep long enough, maybe that is. Professor Walker also went on to explain that similar fertility-related issues also arise in the female when a woman does not get enough sleep as well.
The next one I would speak about is sleep and cardiovascular disease. The links there between a lack of sleep and heart attack and stroke, hypertension are incredibly strong. I'll give you just one example. Here you don't need a whole night of sleep deprivation. All it takes is 1 hour. Because there is a global experiment performed on 1.6 billion people across 70 countries twice a year. And it's called daylight savings time.
Right.
Now, in the spring, when we gain an hour of sleep, when we lose an hour of sleep, we see a subsequent 24% increase in heart attacks the following day.
Wow. That's astonishing.
But in the autumn, when we gain an hour of sleep, we see a 21% reduction in heart attacks.
It's incredible.
So that's how I think fragile our bodies are to even the smallest perturbation of sleep. And by the way, you see exactly that same profile around daylight savings time for road traffic accidents, for suicide rates. You can even see this, by the way, in federal judges and their sentencing, that on that Monday after losing 1 hour of sleep, the federal sentences are far more harsh, whereas in the autumn, if you get your sentencing, you actually get a more lenient sentence.
It's incredible.
You can see it all over, and that's just 1 hour of lost sleep.
Your health should be really your top priority. And given these absolutely interesting and actually shocking facts, I would really encourage you to question whether it is really worthwhile to stay up that additional hour to just watch TV or browse Facebook or whatever, or even watch YouTube for that matter, if that means you get an hour less sleep than what you actually need to. I think the price, we don't realize how high of a price we really pay for this, and I would like to encourage you, even though maybe you watch a little bit less YouTube, and that of course may not be in my personal interest. However, I value your health much more, and I would encourage you to try and watch perhaps my content on a different time of day, but not super late at night, if that means you're not getting your sleep.
Drowsy driving is usually much more fatal in terms of its damaging, in terms of car crashes, is the following. When you're drunk or you're high, you typically react too late.
Right, so reactions are slowed down.
Slowed
but
down.
You're reacting.
But you're reacting.
Right.
When you are sleep deprived, you don't react at all
Right.
because you have a microsleep.
Right.
So at that point, there is a 2-ton missile traveling at 70 miles an hour on the motorway, and no one is in charge. That's why sleep-related accidents are usually much more deathly than drink driving or drugs.
We must never neglect that our actions may have severe consequences on others. I have just recently been made aware that the parents of a good friend of mine were in a car accident at 10 a.m. because the driver, coming in the opposite direction, fell asleep at the wheel.
Then you can start to come into the home and ask what else is compromising your sleep. We certainly know that blue light emitted from devices can compromise your sleep. There's a fascinating study where they had people reading on an iPad for 1 hour before bed versus just reading a normal book in dim light. And what they found was that the iPad reading, firstly, it delayed the release of a hormone called melatonin. And that hormone needs to be in high amounts to time the healthy onset of your sleep. But the iPad reading before bed decreased the amount of melatonin that was released by 50%, so it slashed it in half. And furthermore, it delayed the onset of that melatonin by about 3 hours. So, you're much closer to Russian time than you are UK time if you're reading an iPad for 1 hour before bed.
Wow.
The third thing is that it disrupted their REM sleep. They had actually a reduction in their dream sleep, which is critical for things like mental health. So the invasion of, I think, technology into our environment, particularly blue light, is a harm. But that's not the only issue. I think technology is, and I'm mindful, of course, of where I'm speaking, but one of the things that technology can cause is just anxiety and stress. And a lot of people keep their phones in their rooms, and the first thing that they do when they wake up in the morning is, hit your PIN code, and this tsunami of the world just invades you.
No, I don't know if Dr. Walker was referring to an iPad set to night shift, where you tone the color to a much warmer, more redshifted color tone, and therefore significantly reduce the amount of blue light. But nevertheless, the screens still emit blue light. It's just how efficient is the filtering and actually the color shift by the pixels above it.
But caffeine also is misunderstood in terms of its duration of action. So caffeine has a half-life of about 6 hours and a quarter life of 12 hours. What that means is that if you have a cup of coffee at noon, half of that caffeine is gone by 6 p.m.
Okay.
But it means that there's still a quarter of that caffeine swirling around in your brain at midnight.
That's amazing.
So in other words, if you were to take a cup of coffee at noon, it's the equivalent of getting into bed at midnight, and before you turn the light out, you swig a quarter of a cup of coffee and you hope for a good night of sleep. And it's probably not going to happen.
So what's the latest I can have my coffee?
I would scale back 14 hours before bed.
Wow.
And then... Really?
Can I have a lot of coffee early?
So you can strategically drink caffeine to help wake you up. But if that's the case, if you're using caffeine before midday, you're probably self-medicating your state of chronic sleep deprivation.
So if you're using it early, then you're self-medicating. If you're using it late, then you're causing yourself a problem.
That's right.
Do you drink coffee?
No, I don't know about you. I just never really liked coffee to begin with. And even though I consider myself, due to small kids, quite sleep deprived, I actually don't drink coffee at all. At best, I drink tea, and that also, not in too large amounts.
Increasing in the depth of sleep. So stages 3 and 4 of non-REM are the deep stages of dreamless sleep.
Dreamless. And
Dreamless.
That's when the body's mending itself. What's happening in those stages?
It is one of the stages where the body goes through a remarkable restoration. We see sort of protein synthesis, we see rebuilding of cells. Deep sleep is probably one of the very best blood pressure medications that you could ever wish for. It's during deep sleep that we get cardiac deceleration, your heart rate plummets, your blood pressure drops. It's essentially a reset for your cardiovascular system. It's also during deep sleep, but also REM sleep, when you restock the armory of your immune system. And that's why when you start to sleep less, you're far more vulnerable to infection. In fact, if you're sleeping 5 hours a night, you're 400% more likely to catch a cold than if you're sleeping 8 hours or more. Wow. Another demonstration of this is if you get a flu shot, and we'll sort of be 4 months away from that time period, but you're not getting enough sleep. If you've only been sleeping, let's say 5 or 6 hours in the week before you get your flu shot, you only produce half of the normal antibody response, rendering that flu shot largely useless because your immune system is so impoverished that it can't respond to the antigen.
Imagine here the implications on the COVID vaccines. By the way, if you're still contemplating getting a COVID vaccine, I'll leave a link here to a video I made on that topic.
Human beings are the only species that deliberately deprive themselves of sleep for no apparent reason. And the reason I make that point is Mother Nature has therefore never had to face the challenge of sleep deprivation throughout the course of evolution. So she's never had to come up with safety nets to risk mitigate this when it happens. Now, there is precedent in biology for that. Why can't we, for example, bank sleep and then use it when we're going to be sleep deprived? That would be lovely. And there is a method like this in biology. It's called the fat cell, because there were times during our evolutionary past when we faced feast and then we had famine. So Mother Nature, facing that challenge, created this thing called the adipose cell, the fat cell, so you could store caloric credit and then spend it when you had a debt, when you had a famine. Where is the fat cell for sleep?
Oh, you should invent that.
I would love to. I would make so much money out of it. But the reason it doesn't exist is because we've never had that challenge. Right. Humans are the only species that do that.
That's amazing. So you would...
Personally, I found this part particularly interesting. It kind of makes me question, are we really too smart for our own good and our own benefit?
But one of the problems there is that that's torture on your biology. It's essentially like flying back and forth, from Moscow to London every single weekend. And your body does not respond to that. And that's the reason that when we see in people who do night shift work, that their disease risks are astronomically higher. In fact, the link between a lack of sleep and cancer has now become so strong that the World Health Organization has classified any form of nighttime shift work as a probable carcinogen.
That's astonishing. So you don't want to do shift work, basically?
No, and you don't want to create what's called social jet lag, which is artificial shift work by sleeping in late, going to bed late at the weekend. Yep. Just try and keep it regular is the best advice.
Party early, people. Okay.
Amazing.
Finally, there's also evidence that poor sleep can impact and actually be a precursor or even a biomarker to type 2 diabetes. So definitely lack of sleep causes many different health issues, and it could actually be so easy to just get enough sleep when we really understand how detrimental not getting a good night of sleep actually is. So back to the investment situation. If you're worried about your investments, your financial situation, and that's keeping you up at night, you have learned that this would likely make you a worse investor because you are really driven by your emotions that impact your investment strategy and how you behave in the market. The best strategy I find always is to find stocks where you are investing in the long term. You are then much less concerned about the short term fluctuations, price decreases. You use those as new investment opportunities to buy the stock that you have a high conviction for at a lower price, and you cost average. And this in the end really means that you can sleep much more soundly. You do not have to worry about your financials, and you are likely going to have much better returns, really literally, while you sleep. I hope you found this video very useful and you may consider changing your sleeping habits, perhaps to the better. If you do, I'd really be very happy for your improved health. If you enjoyed this content, please like it, and if you are not, I would really appreciate if you subscribe to my channel.